Ha! What up with you? If you want to be a master, you need to learn the basics. So today we are talking about how to shade a cube. All right, so we are just going to draw a cube in space here. I'll put a link in the description to a fantastic book by Robertson that will tell you all about perspective lines and how to construct them and then build your cube in perspective. I am just eyeballing this cube. It's not really a cube, it's maybe a bit more of a rectangle. And that is okay. So here's our cube. And we want to shade this so that it looks real, or more real anyway. So what you'll notice is that we can see three sides, right? That's always going to be the case until what? Until you're in 4D space, which I don't even know what that means, right? So you can always see three sides or three dimensions of an object. So for this particular case, I'm going to pick a line somewhere at the base, or pick a portion somewhere at the base of this line. I'm going to draw this out, project this out in perspective. Right, and right here, and then I'm going to set a line, draw a vertical. This is going to set the height of, I don't know, this is going to be like a desk lamp. So imagine there's a desk lamp here, and then there's a light bulb. Right, so here's your little light bulb, boom, shining brightly. Boom, super bright. Okay. This point right below it is what's called the shadow origin, and we'll use this to project our shadow of this cube back into space. So here we are. This light is slightly above the cube and facing it from this direction. Okay, so this gives us an idea of where our light source is, which is super important whenever you are rendering something. You're trying to make it look real. Okay, so here's this center point. We are going to draw a line that connects the center point of this light down to the ground plane. Draw a line that connects this light to the ground plane somewhere over there. And then again, draw it through this top corner. And then maybe once again for this front corner. Really what we're doing is projecting this top surface. When we're creating the shadow, we're projecting this top surface onto the ground and then connecting it with the side surfaces. Yeah, that might make a bit more sense in a second. Okay, so we've got these four light projection lines mapped out. Now, we are going to draw a line from the shadow origin through each of these edges that are on the ground. Boom, and where they meet, the light ray is a point of the shadow. So this right here is part of the shadow line. Okay. Now, I'm going to draw a line through this. Okay, like that. Now, you know, I've got this line connected here. This point represents this point. This point, where these two meet, represents the cast of this point. Now in between these two, we know there's a straight surface. So on the ground, we know this is also going to be a straight surface, so we can connect these two. Now, from here to here, we have this surface, which is also straight, so we connect that with another straight line. Now, I'm just going to block in the cube here. Draw that, Draw this line all the way through. This point right here, I'm drawing it through the bottom point of that far cube. I don't think I'm explaining this very well, which probably means I don't understand it as well as I should. So be it. Like, I don't understand the physics of it. I just know how to construct it. And so then these two lines are represented by these two lines. So we are going to connect them. Huh. That's not quite accurate. So here's our shadow. We have a shadow, got our box, and I will get better at understanding exactly like what the mechanics are of this shadows being cast so that I can explain it better. In the meantime, we are going to shade. Okay, so we know we have the shape for our shadow, which is this section here. And then we have three surfaces. This top surface is going to be getting the most direct light because it's facing most directly the light. This is going to be our second surface, so this is going to be, top surface is going to be 1, which is going to be the lightest. This front surface is going to be 2, because it's tucked away a bit more from the light than the top surface. Arguably, this light is kind of in the middle, right? So if in theory, I should raise this up a little bit more to make this a better illustration of the light coming down directly on this front surface. But right now it's kind of in the middle, but we're going to take some liberties and say this is going to be the lightest surface. And then this surface back here is going to be our 3 surface, or the darkest of the range. So I'm going to start by taking the edge of my pencil and just lightly dusting the top surface. Okay. And as it gets a little bit further away from the light on this back surface, I make it just a smidge darker. Right? No surface is the same value across the entire surface. Right? So there's always a little bit of a fade or an ombre. And then as I come to this 2 surface, I'm going to make it a little bit darker even yet than the top surface. Right, again, being careful to use the side of my pencil to get a nice controlled gradation. Now again, as I come down this surface and get closer to the ground, the surface is getting a little bit lighter. Right, you'll notice it's a little bit lighter here than it is here, and that's because of something called reflected light. So up here, take a step back. There is light that's coming from this source, bouncing off the ground, and then bouncing back into this surface. More of this reflected light is reaching the lower section of the cube because it's closer to the ground surface. As you move farther away from the ground surface, you're getting less reflected light, so it's going to be a little bit darker. Right, so keep that in mind. Right, so we are making the top side of this surface slightly darker than the bottom side, or the bottom portion, right? To account for reflected light bouncing off the table that we're assuming this cube is on and reflecting back into the cube surface. Now, this back surface is even going to be darker still than the number 2 surface, right? 1, 2, 3. So we're going to start here, just making it a little bit darker. And I like to build up slowly. I don't like to just go straight to my darkest value. But I can already tell that it needs to be a little bit darker than what it is now. And the same thing is true on this side as was true for the number 2 side when we're thinking about reflected light. There's still going to be some reflected light from the environment bouncing off the table and into this surface. All right, so down in this area, as it gets a little bit closer to the table surface, we're going to lighten this up just a bit. Now the reflected light isn't going to be as pronounced on this back surface as it is on the front surface that is more closely aligned to the light source. Okay? Because that front number 2 surface is getting more of a direct hit from the light off the table and into this reflected section. On this 3 surface, it's kind of an ambient light that's reflecting. It's not a direct light reflecting from the source off the table and into the surface. Okay, so we're starting to build this up, and you can squint your eyes if you're having a hard time reading the values and making sure that they're reading as a 1, 2, 3 value breakup. Squint your eyes just enough and leaving them open just enough so that you can see the value, and it will be more clear than when you completely open your eyes. Try it. All right, just trust me on this one. Squint your eyes and you'll be able to see value better than when your eyes are wide open. I'm not sure what it is about the mechanics of the eye, oops, that makes that so. Probably something to do with low light. Okay. And then from here, we are going to start working on that shadow. Okay. And the shadow is going to be darkest right here where it's closest to the cube itself, right? Because it's an occlusion shadow. There's no light reflecting into this shadow that's closest to the cube. Whereas as you start to move farther away from the cube and farther out onto this table surface, similar to what happens on the 2 and 3 surfaces, you'll get reflected light from the environment that fills the shadow, right? So the shadow itself, as it moves farther away from the source of the shadow, which in this case is the cube, it starts to fill with more and more reflected light, which makes the shadow lighter. Now in this instance, we still want the shadow to read darker than the cube. The cube itself is probably like a medium gray kind of a tone. It's not pure white, it's not pure black. But sometimes you can play with the value of the object, and you want to be conscious of how the value of the shadow relates to the item that you're drawing. You don't want the shadow to compete with your object unless artistically that is your intent, right? And that's right, rules are made to be broken, and I don't think that you have lots of liberties with the shadows. You can tell a lot of story in the shadow. There's a lot more subtlety. People don't really pay attention to what's in the shadow, what's not completely illuminated. And because of that, they miss so much of the texture and the subtlety of life. So pay attention to the reflected light in the shadow. Right, and really just build it up slowly. Building it up slowly. Right now, we've got a pretty good representation of a cube. Leave a comment if you have any. Leave a question. Leave a like. Subscribe if you haven't already. And keep an eye out. I will be having more of these drawing fundamental videos coming out soon. All right, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something here. And I'm going to keep finessing this while you go your way. See you soon.